What is going on, Hive Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and have you ever done everything to a T perfectly? Done the protocol, every regimen, did the calorie counting, ate completely clean, but yet the scale still doesn't move for you? I'm gonna explain why, and I'm gonna show you how to make that scale finally budge. Stay tuned. Now, the question I just asked you was, have you done everything perfect, yet the scale doesn't move for you? Now, before I answer that, I'm gonna ask you a flip side question. Have you woken up one day and out of nowhere just finally lost 2 to 3 pounds? You were pretty excited that day, but you didn't really understand what happens. You just figured, okay, this is where I completely snapped my plateau and now I'm moving quickly. But what's really happening? Are you losing 3,500 calories times 3? Because that's how much you would need to lose a pound of body fat. You see, the culprit isn't body fat. Let's use some historical context as data so that you can better understand where I'm going here. During World War II, Dr. Ancel Keys led a very controversial and very groundbreaking scientific study in which 36 men participated in a somewhat semi-starvation in terms of caloric deficit, in which they consumed 1,500 calories per day for 6 months. And that is not the only thing that they did. They also went through hard labor during that time. So the exercise is there and the caloric deficit is also there. But what happened during this experiment? Now, you may or may not have heard of this experiment, but it's called the Minnesota starvation experiment. What ended up happening in this experiment is that when they first started the experiment, they lost a good amount of weight every single week, about 2 pounds per week. But then after the experiment continued, it became much more of an unpredictable thing. They may lose weight, they may somehow gain weight, they may just lose a pound, they may just lose half a pound. So it was confusing the scientists as they didn't understand what was happening. Why? If they're doing a specific caloric intake of just 1,500, why isn't this weight loss just continuing to be linear? One universal trigger for all of this was during the halfway mark, during the 3-month mark. To celebrate, they actually gave all 36 men a 2,300 calorie meal, and almost all of them woke up the next day 3 to 4 pounds lighter. Now, this is probably confusing you as much as this confused the scientists at the time. But what they found was that the participants were losing body fat, which is why I always specifically explain that body fat is the most important thing and everything else is there, but the weight is not going to tell you the body fat story. The weight is just going to tell you a complete package of so many different things. But this video is to explain how to actually move that weight on the scale. What they realized is that the water retention was extremely high with all of the participants. And this is because there are many factors that can keep water retained in your body. Now, I'm gonna break down the things that you can do to finally snap that water retention. It's more than just consuming water. It takes a lot more sometimes to finally get your body to flush it all out. If you're thinking that you don't look bigger with water, you actually do. Water creates much more puffiness, and if you can flush that water retention out of your body, you will actually look much leaner because that puffiness will come off as the water sits on top of cells, sometimes on top of your muscles. So if you want to take that off and you want to focus on your body fat, I'm going to give you the tips that you need. Now, one of the most amazing things is being able to flush out water weight and waking up to see 3 pounds lost on the scale, confirming all of your hard work to lose the body fat that you've been trying to lose for so long. Now that you know all of these things, you can just basically relax. I mean, literally relax. They found that the water retention with the Minnesota starvation experiment was in part due to cortisol levels being so high. They were under a lot of stress. They had hard labor as well as just eating the 1,500 calories per day. It increased their stress level, which increased their cortisol level, and because their cortisol cortisol level was high, they were holding on to a lot of water. But once they had that big meal, cortisol levels relaxed because it's just been so long since they had a meal of that caliber, and then boom, water retention released. But we know so much more about how to release water retention now than we ever had before. Yes, relaxing, doing things like yoga, doing things that you love, sleeping longer hours, keeping yourself stress-free. And that means even getting on the scale. When you get on the scale and you see that it doesn't move, understanding that if you're doing everything right, this is most likely water retention. Even create a zen for yourself in that moment and understand, okay, this is water retention. Let me go ahead and do the strategies to get this water retention to flush out of my body. Now, we've talked about this before. Sodium is a huge culprit to water retention. The more sodium you take in, the more that will create the water that is held inside of your cells. For you to flush that out, you want to drink more water, but you want to go ahead and consume sodium's arch enemy, which is potassium. And now the thing with potassium is that most people don't take the time a day to consume foods that contain potassium. And the foods that contain potassium, the most popular ones are avocado, mushroom contain potassium, and bananas, my favorite, contain potassium. So if you make an effort to consume potassium more than you do sodium, you will flush your body of water retention. Sodium acts as a water retention tool. Potassium actually acts as a tool to push out water from your system. So potassium is sodium's kryptonite and vice versa. So increase your potassium intake and decrease your sodium intake, and you will be closer to flushing out the water that you hold in your body. Now, one thing that you definitely don't want to do is you don't want to look at that scale and think you need to reduce more calories or that you need to go to the gym and go crazier and go harder than ever before, because you're going to be stressed when you go on the scale. You're going to be more stressed when you're working very, very hard in the gym and when you're reducing much more calories than needed. And then you're gonna be even doubly stressed or triple stressed or quadruple stressed when you go back on the scale and notice you may have gained a pound or not lost anything after all that hard work. And it's gonna make you extremely frustrated, which is going to continue to raise your cortisol levels. So you want to keep your cortisol levels down. Once you free your mind by understanding that the weight isn't moving, not because you're doing things wrong in the fat burning department, but because you're doing things wrong in the water retention department, then you know what you need to do next. It's not go harder at the gym or go harder or more aggressive with the calories. It's paying attention to water retention, basically. One cool thing that you can do is every now and then find moments to increase the caloric intake. Doing a consistent caloric deficit for such a long time, for just 2 weeks, for example, or 3 weeks, you can change it up a little bit just to flush out that water and then get back to it as soon as you're in a comfortable state. So if you're doing 1500 calories or 1700 calories, try to do 2000 calories or 2100 calories just to get your body comfortable and understanding that you have the ability to eat these foods. Keep yourself at ease, keep your body at ease, making sure that you're keeping those cortisol levels down. And I say this only if you are doing everything right, you're doing the caloric deficit and it's taking a while and you're not seeing any weight loss there. Intermittent fasting will help you burn the body fat, but if you're trying to move that scale, you're going to have to implement these strategies. Cardio helps a lot as well because it helps you sweat out the water that's being retained in your body. One thing you may have noticed is that if you don't implement the cardio protocol, a lot of times the scale doesn't move. Even if you build a lot of muscle, if you work on your muscles, the scale itself doesn't move until you implement actual cardio. And this is because you're sweating out the water that's being retained in your body. And that's why a lot of people do saunas and all this stuff where they just sit down and sweat it out, because to them, they're seeing the scale move. And to a lot of people, there's a misconception that when that scale moves because they're doing that, that means that they are losing body fat. But in reality, all they're doing is getting closer to revealing what their actual body weight is. Do not forget, guys, it takes 3,500 calories to lose a pound of body fat. A lot of times when that whoosh effect or that free fall weight loss effect happens, under the hood, you've been burning a lot of body fat for a long time because you've been very, very strict with your diet. You've been doing intermittent fasting, for example, perfectly. Everything has been well, but the water retention remains or increases or expands, and that can move super, super fast. You can lose pounds of water within a day, literally within a day. Professional boxers literally gain over 10 to 15 pounds in a course of one day simply on water weight alone. Simply on the water regain, they can actually take their weight from 140 to about 155. That's how drastic water is in your body in terms of what you're gonna see on the scale. Now I wanna thank my patrons from my Patreon, and I'm gonna put their names right up here. And I'll see you guys on Sunday. Peace.